Next slide. Okay, so thank you all for your help in the chat. I definitely appreciate that. But also that means that you all know how to use the chat function. So we're going to be using the chat function to share links only. There is a Q&A button. That's where we're going to be taking any questions you have related to the Coastal Stories grant program. So please do put your questions in the Q&A. It helps us manage and organize the questions and the responses a lot better. And we have two people in the background as our tech support. And I just want to give them a quick shout out, Lexi Carruthers and Aaron Gravely. They're going to be helping to manage the chat and the Q&A and putting any questions that may have escaped the Q&A side, or sorry, escaped in the chat into the Q&A. The next item that we have on your menu bar, there should be a show captions button. So if you like to read what we're speaking as we're speaking live, click the show captions button. We are still figuring out the interpretation function. That button should be down in your menu bar, and we'll make an announcement if we're able to get that up and going. Next is that we wanted to add a little bit of an opportunity to network. Part of the Coastal Stories grant program, it's really important that we elevate community voices. However, we're encouraging partnerships between communities and entities that may own parcels of land. And so if I can ask Rachel to post this Google Doc in the chat.
Just did.
Up here, you'll see an example. Just so if you put your email in here, you're consenting to your email being shared with all the attendees here. So please do, if you're interested, put your name, your email, your organization, and then organization type. We're looking for a community organization, a landowner, nonprofit, tribe or tribal organization, or local government. And then project or community location. So if you have a project idea, please put that description in column E, and what community, put your location in column E. And then in column F, what kind of partnerships you're looking for. So for example, if you're a community organization, you might be looking for a partnership with the landowner where you can actually implement the project. And then in column G, what is your story idea? What story do you want to be told? Thank you. For those of you that are joining us for the first time or don't know much about us, we thought we'd put just a quick introductory slide. We are the State Coastal Conservancy. Our mission is to protect, restore, and provide access to the California coast. We work along the entirety of California's coast, and we include the entirety of coastal watersheds. So we're not just down by the beaches and the shoreline, we're also up the watershed. And our jurisdiction really covers 75% of California's population. And so with this grant program, we're going to talk a little bit more about public access. So just a little background about the Coastal Stories grant program. The program was inspired by an Atlantic article from 2018. It was titled 5 Ways to Make the Outdoors More Inclusive. And we were inspired by this article, understanding that California's coast has long been used as spaces of sustenance, culture, recreation, and community for everyone, and that access to the coast, a coastal watershed, and outdoor spaces is really important. However, in these spaces, there's often European settler perspectives that dominate the stories and the narratives that we read about these outdoor spaces, whether that's on signage, kiosk, or pamphlets and things like that. So in order to make California's outdoors more welcoming and inclusive, we want to increase the representations of groups historically excluded from these stories. So through the Coastal Stories grant program, we seek to fund projects that develop and deliver content via installations or other products that tell stories of communities who have been historically excluded. By historically excluded communities, the definition includes but is not limited to people of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with disabilities, immigrant communities, low-income communities, and others. And here we have an example of a mural in San Lorenzo River down in Santa Cruz that celebrates Indigenous language and culture in relation to the water. So first we're going into Conservancy project applicant eligibility. And in order to apply for funding from us, you need to fall into 3 categories. So the first one is to be a federally recognized tribe. The second is to be a nonprofit organization, and the other is to be a public agency. So by nonprofit organization, you must qualify under the provisions of Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code with the state. Organizations that do not have a 501c and tribes that are not federally recognized may apply with a nonprofit organization as a fiscal sponsor or partner with one of the 3 eligible entities. And just wanted to do a quick pause here to see if anything has changed with interpretation setting.
Still working on it.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so eligible projects must meet our program priorities. So the first priority is to promote a sense of belonging in outdoor spaces by presenting perspectives that include historically excluded communities. Second is to engage representatives of historically excluded communities to develop and share their coastal perspectives and stories. And the next is that it improves educational content in California's outdoor spaces by correcting one-sided histories, retelling stories in a more appropriate and inclusive way, or developing content that shares stories that haven't been told yet. The next is that it use creative forms of community engagement. And last but not least, creates installation and other products that are free and publicly accessible for the community and or the intended audience. So a little bit more about the program funding and project requirements. This year, we have up to 1.2 million that will be awarded this grant round. Although there's no maximum or minimum funding requirement, we anticipate awarding around $175,000 per project. But again, no maximum and minimum. So feel free to make your case, but in the past, we've awarded around that amount. The next is a little bit about our fund source. We're using Proposition 40 bond funds. So this requires that the project be completed no later than February of year 2027. It requires tangible products. We'll get into more about what we mean by tangible products in the upcoming slides. It requires approximately a 15-year maintenance period after the product is created. And projects with matching contribution must be prioritized when we're reviewing the application. Again, we have more information in the coming slides. I also want to announce that our interpretation team has figured out how to make the setting work. So Aaron just posted
Anunció que
in
el
the chat,
intérprete ahora
interpretation
está
should be working
presente.
now.
La interpretación debe estar funcionando ahora.
We're still hearing you, Conrado. Can you try selecting the interpretation Spanish channel? You should have only received an interpreter link, so that hopefully will work.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Says interpretation is off. It just may not be working this time, unfortunately. I'm so sorry, everyone.
Yeah, we'll look into this setting after this session. It's still showing to me that the a notice interpretation hasn't joined. Although we see that's not true. Okay, thank you so much for working on that. Okay, so we're going into more details on what we mean by tangible products. So the storytelling content that's created must result in something that's physical. So either or on a physical object. So murals, signs, and sculptures are an example of that, or other physical products include maps and informational booklets. Although we encourage digital content to be produced, it must be paired with a tangible product. It cannot be standalone digital content. The maintenance period, typically 15 years minimum, which means we want you to maintain that product or that content for 15 years. But depending on what the product is, we may be adjusted based on, what the reasonable lifetime of each product is. And so our staff can assist with determining that requirement. So matching contributions, while they're not required, they will be given priority in our application review process. There is no minimum that you have to provide for matching contributions, and contributions can include a lot of things. It can include time, the time of the applicant, time of project partners or volunteers. It can include donations of materials or other services that you define in your application. A one-to-one contribution is not required. Even though it says match, it doesn't need to be the same level of match. And if your project is selected, you will need to document the matching contributions that you described in your application. The next is that we're highly encouraging partnerships.
I can take over
I'm
from
so
here.
sorry. Go ahead,
Erica.
Rachel.
Sorry. So my name is Rachel, and I will do the second half of the presentation here. So just wanted to reiterate what Erica was just saying, which is we highly encourage partnerships between landowners, community-based organizations, historians, and other types of storytellers. Landowners should partner with communities to elevate culturally relevant stories, and communities should partner with landowners for implementation and maintenance of the project. We can assist you with connecting to these partners if you need that help, and we shared that link to the partnership spreadsheet in the chat. So the next slide, some eligible project examples from years past include a project which you'll see on the left here, which is the Tolowa, I hope I'm saying that right, Tolowa Coastal Stories Project, which will install kiosks with interpretive content throughout Beachfront Park and along the California Coastal Trail in Crescent City, to tell the stories of the Tolowa Deni or Tolowa people. Another example are the two of these murals from the Agua Por Vida project in Sleepy Lagoon, implemented by the East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. The murals are at Riverfront Park in Maywood, California, and are meant to celebrate and tell the rich Indigenous and Latino heritage in the community and their connection to the river. Next slide. Some ineligible project examples include a project where the content and the products do not center the historically excluded community's perspectives and or contributions. Or the project site is not a publicly accessible outdoor space, or the project is primarily social media campaigns and or digital content that is not connected to a physical product or place. Next slide. So in terms of proposal submission and our selection process, applying for this program consists of a pre-proposal followed by a full proposal upon invitation. The pre-proposal, which is included in the RFP document, is due by 11:59 p.m. on March 31st. We'll respond to pre-proposal submissions by May 30th. And at this point, we will either invite you to submit a full proposal, provide comments and ask that you resubmit your pre-proposal, or make a decision that your project is not competitive for our program. If you are invited to submit a full proposal, we'll provide the full proposal form and instructions on when and how to submit. You can reach out to Conservancy staff if you need help or have questions on the full proposal. You'll need to have proof of support from the landowner at this point. Once we receive your full proposal, we'll get back to you within 60 days on a decision or let you know if we need more time for review. Next slide. So we're just going to go over the pre-proposal cover page a little bit. The first step is in the process of submitting the pre-proposal, which can be downloaded from our Coastal Stories webpage. And I have that link, which I will put in the, I don't have that link actually. It's here it is. Hold on. Let me just put that in the chat real quick. Let's see. Sorry for the delay here. Just let me make sure I get that in. Okay. Your pre-proposal will determine whether you get invited to submit a full proposal. So though it's relatively short and simple, you'll want to make sure you're representing your project well in this step, the pre-proposal step. We encourage you to reach out to us to consult about your project prior to submission, especially if you're a new applicant, so that we can provide any initial feedback that may guide you. This screenshot here is of the cover sheet, which might look familiar if you've applied to other Conservancy grant rounds. The information requested here is pretty straightforward. In the top box for contact info, write in the info of the organization that is the primary applicant. That would be the organization who is receiving and managing the funds if selected for a grant. That means if you are working with a fiscal sponsor, this box should include their information. If you are a 501c3 nonprofit, please include your IRS letter as an attachment to your pre-proposal. The second box is where you'll put project name, the amount of Conservancy funds requested for your project, and the total cost of the project. Then write in your approximate start and end dates. Projects are expected to begin in early 2025 and should be completed by February 2027 when the funds expire. In the last box, location info, write the county or counties that your project will take place in. In the specific location box, you can give us the latitude and longitude coordinates of the project. And if there are multiple coordinates, you can just choose one. And you can do this by going to Google Maps and clicking your cursor on a location on the map and then copying the coordinates. Along with the coordinates, tell us what they represent, a park, a trailhead, or a specific location description. Next slide. So in terms of the project description in the pre-proposal, throughout the pre-proposal, we have suggested a number of sentences or paragraphs that you should aim to answer each question within. To leave ample time for questions, we're not going to go over the entire pre-proposal now here in this webinar, so please read the instructions carefully as you fill out the pre-proposal and follow them. There is some leeway in our suggested lengths for your answers, so if having an extra sentence really makes a difference for you, go ahead and include it, but please do try to be concise. We have a new project description section broken down into more direct questions that will require less text. 2 to 3 sentences is suggested. So what is the story you would like to tell? What is the connection or significance of the subject to a particular outdoor space? Who is the subject of your story? Who is the target audience for this representation or story? Just state them here. You can give more details later in the application. Why? Why is this important? An important story to be told? What specific storytelling problem or shortfall are you addressing? Next slide. Additionally, we would like to know how you plan to tell the story. Specifically, please describe storytelling products that will be created. Be specific about the portion of the project that would be funded by Conservancy funds. Where will the project exist? Briefly describe the project location and attach a map of the project location. Photos are also helpful. And is there anything else you would like us to know about the project? We welcome maps and images as attachments, etc. Next slide. So who's involved? This slide has to do with who's implementing the project. List the project partners and describe each role and identify which one is the landowner. And this is fairly brief. And then what community is the subject of the story? Describe the extent to which that community will be directly involved in developing the project. And then how will your project reach its intended audience? If you can, please include metrics such as measuring visitation if feasible. The who questions earlier, this is the opportunity to provide more details on who is involved. And so there's basically 3 who's, and there's the area, your target audience, and the community that is the subject of your storytelling. Next slide. Oh, one more thing about metrics. Qualitatively, we want to know how the project reaches your audience. So if there are metrics you can add, great. But we realize this can be a little bit tricky, so it is optional. Okay, in terms of the pre-proposal project schedule and budget, for the pre-proposal, we do not have a set format for the budget table and schedule, so you may use whatever format you prefer. Just make sure you are providing all the information requested in the instructions. If you'd prefer to have a template to work with, you can contact us and we can provide that for you. For the project schedule, please provide a schedule that lists all the major project tasks and milestones and estimate their completion dates. For the project budget, include the estimated total cost of the project, what activities you're requesting the Conservancy funding for, and the proposed sources of additional funding. Include proposed funding sources even if they are not yet secured, but make the status of other funds clear in your pre-proposal. Next slide. So for the submission and next steps for the pre-proposal phase, at the end of the pre-proposal, there's a checklist that you can use when you're preparing your final submission. Your submission should include the pre-proposal document, which should be around 3 pages or less, a project location map, and or photos. You are welcome to, but not required to, include any additional media, plans, or images that you may have that would help convey your projects to the review committee. Once your proposal is ready, you can submit it to grants@scc.ca.gov by March 31st, 2024, again, 11:59 p.m. Please note that there are 2 different emails on this slide. Though you'll submit pre-proposals and proposals to grants@scc.gov, for all other questions or requests for project consultations, please use Coastal Stories at scc.ca.gov. And we want to remind and invite you to reach out to us if you want to discuss your project, or you want support in building partnerships, or you have any questions as you prepare your pre-proposal. We especially encourage this for new applicants. Thank you. That's our Coastal Stories overview for you. And we just want to thank you all for being here and for your interest in round 3 of this exciting program. Now we'll open the floor up for questions, and Rachel and me and Erica will read questions that have been written in the Q&A. Feel free to keep adding to the Q&A. We have about 30 minutes for questions, I think, unless we're running short of time. And if there are any we don't get to, we'll do our best to follow up to the group with the answers.
Thank you, Rachel. Also, thank you, Lexi and Aaron, for fielding questions in the group chat. And just want to also thank Conrado and Aaron for trying to figure out the translation feature, and for those that were posting in the chat. We do see that there's a couple questions here that we can go ahead and answer live. The first one is, does publicly accessible mean 24/7? For example, a community garden that is free and publicly accessible but has specific hours of operation. I can go ahead and take this one. Publicly accessible doesn't mean 24/7. What we're referring to are spaces that are free for the public to be able to get to, that are on public lands, or if they are on private lands, that they have hours of operation that the public can visit free of admission.
Would a community garden that's free and open to the public within the city limits of Santa Rosa and Sonoma County be in the jurisdiction of the Coastal Conservancy? It looks like it from the map, but just want to confirm. Yes, I believe it would be. Sonoma County is considered a coastal county in our jurisdiction. So the answer is yes. Just to show the slide for what makes a project ineligible again.
Okay, will do. Let me share.
That's number 14. So we'll show that in just a moment.
Okay. Oh,
There you go.
Maybe we can hold that up while we answer the next question, and the attendee can type another question. Can matching funds be in kind? How close to projects? Oh, okay. Maybe I'll answer the first part, and Rachel, I'll read the second part for you to answer. So can matching funds be in kind? Yes. Matching funds can be in kind, and we just ask that you describe that match in your application. And then the second part of the question is how close to do projects need to be to the physical coastline? And I can go back to.
So to answer that question, we work in coastal watersheds which extend inland from the coast, itself, or even sometimes inland of coastal counties. So as long as there is some nexus to the coast, that there's some, waterway that connects to the coast, then we consider that our jurisdiction. In other words, it doesn't have to be right on the water or even within view of it.
The next question is, will this grant also be offered in 2025 or is it only being offered in 2024? That is a good question. Right now, we only have funds for 2024. We would like to identify funds to continue the grant program, but at this time, it's just 2024.
Okay, similar question. Is there a way to get more zoomed in the map of the jurisdiction? Yeah, this is a general map, so if you have a specific question about your location and whether it's in our jurisdiction, maybe type that in. We can try to help you, but you may have to reach out to us by email and we'll do the investigation.
Just to add to that, we can direct you to our website that has also details on our jurisdiction. The next question is, can part of the physical element of the project be located inland as well as there being physical elements on the coast? I think the response to that is yes. We understand that communities migrate from the coast inland. We do need the component that is within our jurisdiction, that is the coastal watershed. But yes, it can have an element that is more inland.
There were a couple questions in the chat. Are you able to make, oops, that's not it. I saw another one. And we are in Sacramento. Can we do murals here? And that's in real Amira's question. What does publicly accessible lands include? Do they have to be close to the coast or anywhere? So, well, the Sacramento River runs into the Delta, which runs to the coast. So technically that is a coastal watershed. So I think that means you're within jurisdiction. And I think there was a question about the Delta too.
Right.
The more you make a connection to the coast, the better.
All right, so we have more questions in the Q&A chat. How successful have grants been that tackle two separate storytelling ideas with different partners, locations, goals each? We have two concurrent projects that would be great fit for this, but they are entirely separate. I was wondering if maybe, Rachel, you could, I don't know how separate the projects are, but there was a Central Coast project that was telling stories of 3 different communities along the San Lorenzo River. They were,
Yeah. So that project aimed to amplify work that had been previously done along the San Luis River in installing kind of art and interpretive sculpture type works. And so we funded kind of a next level of magnifying those stories and adding to that. And that was Latino community, Chinese community, and the kind of indigenous Latino community. But it all occurred kind of, it was tied together by the water theme along the San Lorenzo River. So, but it did kind of tell three stories kind of wrapped into one. So that is an example of a project we funded.
We also just last grant round funded a project that spanned 3 of our regions. Oh, and it was a story about I think it was just a story about the coastal regions, and had it was a partnership with I think a nonprofit organization and a few tribes. And so that content is still being developed, but we did award that project.
Yeah, and when we say regions, the Coastal Conservancy has a North Coast region, a Bay region, Central Coast, and Southern California. So this was a project that spanned several of those regions.
Next is, if you're seeking partners to do some in-kind donations but don't have specific amounts, would this be worth so would it be worth by the time of the pre-proposal deadline? Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. Do you need to calculate the worth of that by the time of the pre-proposal deadline? How should this be handled in the budget? So the match does not have to be a dollar amount. You can describe what that match is, be it number of hours, items donated, and things like that. You don't necessarily have to translate it to a dollar amount, but when you track it, if you are awarded the funds to do the project, we need to see that that match has occurred.
Are there any programs at the Coastal Conservancy that would cover similar projects within indoor spaces? I think the main reason that we've structured this program the way we have is because we just want to maximize accessibility. So projects can be within indoor spaces, but we would like the public to be able to access those without having to pay. And so I think that's the main, we're not saying projects can't happen within indoor spaces. We just, at least that's my understanding. We just want those spaces to be freely publicly accessible.
I just want to take a pause here to remind everyone to please put your questions in the Q&A chat box. I think Erin and Lexi have been fielding questions in the webinar chat, so thank you for doing that. I know people have joined at different times, so just want to keep encouraging you to put it in the Q&A chat box. Oh, did I skip one?
If our storytelling elements require long-term research, can we still submit a final deliverable for this grant that is supported by preliminary research results?
Did I take a stab at that one? By long-term research, we do have to have the funds spent by February of 2027. So that doesn't, there's not a lot of room for long-term research, unfortunately, with our fund source. And then depending on what the final deliverable is, going back to an earlier slide, tangible product needs to be, let's see. Yeah, like a physical installation or a product like a map or booklet or something like that that you're handing out to the public. That is, I think that's the sort of content that we would require as a deliverable.
Is there a limitation to the number of coastal counties that can participate in a unified proposal? I would say the answer is no.
Next question is, we work with youth and would want this to be youth-led project, which means some of the details wouldn't be decided until our cohort was brought together. Does the project need to be totally defined before the application? The answer is no, the project doesn't need to be totally defined, but we would like to see, you know, kind of some guardrails around what you're developing, because we do have to connect the story to an outdoor space and a historically excluded community. So as long as you can make the case that that story is being developed, and it might be, you know, describing the youth that you work with in the community that they come from, and that there's, I think, sharing some sort of theme would be helpful, even if the exact story hasn't fully come together again, especially if you're creating the story with input from the historically excluded community.
If you have funded a coastal stories project in a county, will that influence your decision not to fund another project in the same county? Not necessarily. We're looking at a lot of different factors when we look at a project, so it's not just about whether or not we have funded something already in that county. Geographic distribution may be one consideration, but there's lots of other, you know, factors. So
the next question is, if the digital content is paired with a physical product like a book, does it still need to be tied to a specific point on a map? So when developing a project, digital content and a book is definitely an eligible product, but it does need to be tied to an outdoor space. That is pretty much the, like, within the jurisdiction of our agency. So it could be one point, it could be multiple points, but it does need to have a component that is telling a story about an outdoor space and enticing the audience to feel welcomed or go visit that space.
I'll just say that part of this program, this program is part of our Explore the Coast program. And so one of the goals of that program is to actually get people out at the coast, to the coast. And so that is part of the reason there's an actual physical outdoor, you know, or coastal space requirement. Would public schools qualify as public and accessible spaces? I'm not sure, because they're not really open to the entire public. So I would say no, but we may have to explore that. Would you agree, Erica?
I agree. I think we've come across this in a past application. So, although it's a public school, unless there are hours that the school is open to the general public, then no, it would not qualify as a publicly accessible space. I think that was what we landed on before.
If we reach out to past award winners, can we reuse materials at another location to save money? I don't see why not. Basically, if you're applying to us for funding, we just, we need to know what it is you are going to be spending money on. But if you have cost saving strategies, that's great. You might just want to describe that in the project pre-proposal.
We have applied for the ETC grant recently. Are we still eligible to apply for this grant? The answer is yes. You can apply to the ETC grant and apply to us. Getting awarded a Coastal Stories grant doesn't mean you can't be awarded by our other grant programs.
Maybe you can take that one too. Yeah.
Oh. We are considering a spoken word storytelling project focused on the immigrant farm worker experience in San Mateo County coastside. The storytelling happens once a month in a public space. Would a video of this series qualify as a physical artifact? So that would qualify as digital content for us. Because I think that's the nature of videos these days. And so because of the type of funds that we have, we need some physical pairing. Like if you were to make a pamphlet or some other publicly accessible educational content from that video, or to install a sign or mural of some sort that kind of celebrates this word of mouth storytelling process. But the video in of itself would not make your application competitive. And we're nearing time. It's about 12:57, so we probably have time to answer one more question if there's another question. We'll give it a minute or two.
So I see,
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
there's a couple in the chat. Mhm.
Okay, there was a follow-up to the last question. So we transcribe stories into a book. So yes, so if you are, and this is others that might be thinking of maps, pamphlets, books. Yes, the book is a physical product, and so that would make you eligible for these funds. And we would want to see alongside that your plan on how to distribute this book to make sure it's reaching its intended audience, and you have that you're able to reach your targeted audience, people accessing the book. And I do want to reemphasize that when we say free and publicly accessible, there cannot be when you're distributing the book, there can't be a cost associated with it. It needs to be like a handout.
Can stories be about the plight of refugees and immigrants and their relation with the coast worldwide, not only in California? I would say there needs to be a California nexus, but I think the answer is yes. Erica, do you have thoughts on that?
I agree. Because our funds need to be in our jurisdiction, Just like Rachel said, there needs to be a nexus within our jurisdiction, which is the coastal watershed of California. And it needs to be tied to an outdoor space that you tell the story. So while it's eligible, as long as you can make that connection, it'll be eligible. And we're at time. It's 1 o'clock. Just want to thank you all for joining us for this webinar and your interest in the Coastal Stories program. And just in our final moments, if you want to screenshot our contact information, please do that. Thank you all so much. Rachel, if you have any final words, please go ahead.
No, good luck with your pre-proposals and feel free to reach out to us if you'd like a consultation on your project. Thanks for joining.
All right, we will post a recording of this webinar on our Coastal Stories website and email our constant contact list so everyone has access to this. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. So, oops.
There's still participants as well, just so you know.
Maybe we'll go ahead and log off and then.
Yeah, we can jump on a follow-up call.
On a
Thank you,
team.
Conrado. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties, but you were such a trooper.
Oh no, yeah, thank you guys. I'm sorry I wasn't able to provide the interpretation. I was trying to look up stuff to troubleshoot, but I couldn't find anything. I think it has to come from the